Did you know that every year countless murder cases go cold
leaving families without answers?
and perpetrators free? Tonight,
Sadly.
we're diving into one such case that has haunted investigators and the community for over a decade.
Yeah, it's been a while.
The unsolved murder of 24-year-old Kru Lo in Denver, Colorado.
This case is particularly perplexing because Kru appears to have been a completely innocent victim.
Like, just imagine this.
Imagine
Working hard to build a better life
steps outside for a simple phone call.
and vanishes from this world just like that.
It's a chilling thought, and we're going to unpack every detail we can, drawing from police reports, witness accounts,
We got a lot of material.
and even the voice of the lead detective who refuses to give up.
Absolutely.
We have quite a bit of material to go through, so
Let's jump in.
let's jump right in. It all began on October 16th, 2009,
2009.
around 9 p.m. at the Garden Court Apartments in Denver.
Wow.
Picture a typical Friday night. People are home, relaxing after a long week, maybe having dinner with their families.
Suddenly, the peace is shattered by the sharp crack of gunfire.
Witnesses describe a chaotic scene. People rush to their windows, peering out into the darkness,
Trying to figure it out.
trying to make sense of what they had just heard.
Yeah.
Some saw Kru lying on the ground bleeding,
Oh, no.
but the actual shooting happened too quickly and in the shadows for anyone to get a clear view of the perpetrator.
So who was Kru Lo,
Mm.
this young man whose life was cut tragically short? What do we know about him?
Kru had immigrated from Ethiopia
Okay.
just a few months before his death,
Wow.
drawn to Denver to be closer to his extended family.
Okay.
He was working diligently at a local convenience store, saving every penny he could to pursue his dream of going to college.
That's great.
Everyone who knew him described him as kind, hardworking, and respectful.
So he had no known enemies, no involvement in anything illegal or dangerous?
Exactly. He seemed like he was a model citizen.
It's almost as if he was the perfect victim in a sense,
Yeah.
making the question of why even more baffling.
Exactly. That lack of an apparent motive is one of the things that makes this case so difficult.
Right.
It throws a wrench into typical investigative strategies. Without a clear reason for the crime, it becomes much harder to narrow down potential suspects.
It makes you wonder if the police were dealing with something completely random,
Possibly.
a senseless act of violence that could have happened to anyone.
That's certainly one of the theories that emerged early on in the investigation, but let's not jump ahead just yet.
Okay,
There are some other details about the initial investigation that are worth exploring.
of course. Let's dive into those. What did the police uncover in those first crucial hours and days after the shooting?
Well, as you might expect, they found Kru's ID on him, confirming his identity.
Right.
However, they also discovered some other personal items scattered near his body.
Like what?
Now, Detective Kreider, the lead investigator, never publicly disclosed exactly what these items were.
Okay.
He only emphasized that it wasn't clear whether they belonged to the shooter or if they were just random objects that happened to be there beforehand.
Adding another layer of mystery to an already perplexing situation.
It is.
You have to wonder about the significance of those items.
Right.
Could they hold a clue to the identity of the killer? Or were they just an unfortunate coincidence?
It's a question that has haunted Detective Kreider for years.
Wow.
If those items could be connected to someone, they could potentially crack the case wide open. But without that crucial link, they remain just another piece of an unsolved puzzle.
Now here's where things take an interesting turn, and we start to see how this case is far from a simple open and shut investigation.
Oh.
You see, a significant number of Kru's relatives actually lived in that very same apartment complex.
Really?
Yeah.
You'd think having so many family members nearby would be a boon to the investigation, right?
I would.
You'd imagine someone must have seen something, heard something, anything that could help the police.
Right.
That seems logical.
Right. It seems like a logical assumption.
Yeah.
But that's not quite how it played out, is it?
Not at all. The presence of Kru's family in the complex, while initially seeming helpful, actually created more questions than answers.
Oh, wow.
In fact, it threw investigators a curveball. Initially, none of Kru's family members even realized he was the victim.
Oh, wow.
The police went door to door, showing his picture, trying to gather information.
Oh, my God.
Can you imagine that moment?
Yeah.
You're going about your evening, and suddenly the police are at your door,
Right.
showing you a photo of your loved one, telling you they're gone.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
It was a chaotic and emotional scene. The family was in shock, struggling to come to terms with what had happened.
Right. Did any of them have any insights into potential motives or suspects? Could they think of anyone who would want to harm Kru?
They were just as baffled as the police. They all insisted that Kru had no conflicts with anyone they considered the apartment complex safe.
Oh, okay.
However, there was one detail, one tiny thread that the police clung to, hoping it might lead somewhere. One of Kru's relatives mentioned a possible incident that had occurred at the convenience store where Kru worked.
Oh, okay.
Something about a run-in with a customer that may have involved the police.
That sounds like a potential lead, something that could point investigators in the right direction.
Unfortunately, it turned out to be a dead end.
Oh, no.
The police thoroughly searched their records, but they couldn't find any report of such an incident.
So was this relative mistaken? Or could it be that this incident did happen, but for some reason it wasn't properly documented?
It's a possibility. Remember,
Yeah.
this was 2009.
Right,
Police record keeping wasn't as digitized and centralized as it is today.
right.
It's entirely conceivable that a minor incident, even one involving the police, might not have generated a formal report,
Yeah.
particularly if it was handled informally at the scene.
It's frustrating to think that such a seemingly small detail could hold the key to solving this case, and yet it might be lost forever in the annals of bureaucracy.
It highlights the challenges investigators often face in cases like this. Sometimes, the smallest, most seemingly insignificant detail can be the linchpin that connects everything.
As the weeks turned into months and the leads dwindled, Detective Kreider began to consider a theory that was both unsettling and incredibly difficult to accept: mistaken identity.
The theory of mistaken identity is a double-edged sword in investigations.
How so?
On one hand, it offers a possible explanation when there seems to be no clear motive.
Oh.
On the other hand, it can be incredibly difficult to prove. It's like chasing a ghost.
So walk us through this theory. Why did Detective Kreider start to believe that Kru might have been killed for simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time?
There are several factors that pointed in that direction.
Right.
Firstly, as we've discussed, Kru's background was spotless. He had no enemies, no involvement in anything that would make him a target.
Right.
Secondly, the random items found at the scene further suggested that perhaps the perpetrator had been looking for someone else, and Kru had just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
But if that's the case, who was the intended target?
Right.
And why haven't they come forward? Wouldn't someone, especially in a close-knit community like an apartment complex, have noticed that they were being targeted?
Those are the very questions that have haunted Detective Kreider all these years.
Wow.
It's possible that the intended target was someone visiting the complex that night, someone who was unknown to the residents.
Okay.
Or perhaps the shooters, realizing their mistake and the gravity of their actions, went into hiding, fearing the repercussions of what they had done.
It's a chilling thought, almost like something out of a crime novel.
It is.
This phantom target, who might not even exist, forever linked to Kru's tragic death.
It adds another layer of complexity to an already difficult case.
Right.
And it raises questions about the psychological impact on the perpetrators.
Yeah.
Imagine living with the knowledge that you took an innocent life, even if it was a mistake.
That's a lot.
That's a heavy burden to carry, whether or not you ever face legal justice.
So how do you investigate a case like this, where the victim might not be the intended target? Where do you even begin to look for answers?
Detective Kreider knew that keeping the case in the public eye was crucial.
Okay.
He organized events at the apartment complex, invited the media, anything to spark someone's memory, to get people talking.
Right.
He understood the power of collective memory and community involvement in solving cases like this.
Hoping that someone, somewhere, had a piece of the puzzle, even if they didn't realize its significance.
Exactly.
Right.
He even talked about the limitations of surveillance footage back in 2009.
Yeah.
They could see vehicles on the road outside the complex, but the quality wasn't good enough to identify individuals or license plates.
It was another frustrating obstacle in a case filled with dead ends.
Exactly.
And it brings us back to those random items found at the scene.
Right.
If only they could be linked to someone, it could potentially break the case wide open.
Right.
But without that connection, they remain just tantalizing pieces of a puzzle that no one can solve.
Precisely. It was like searching for a needle in a haystack without even knowing what the needle looked like.
Amidst all this uncertainty and frustration, did any new leads emerge? Did Detective Kreider's efforts to keep the case in the spotlight yield any results?
There was a glimmer of hope, a flicker of light in the darkness. A tip came in through Crime Stoppers,
Oh, wow.
an anonymous program that allows people to provide information to the police without revealing their identity.
Crime Stoppers can be a valuable tool for investigators, especially in cases where witnesses might be afraid to come forward for fear of retaliation.
Absolutely. And in this case, the tip seemed promising.
Okay.
The tipster claimed to have overheard someone talking about the shooting, bragging about their involvement.
So this led the police to a person of interest.
It certainly seemed that way at the time, however. The person of interest vehemently denied any involvement in the shooting, and despite their best efforts, the police couldn't find any concrete evidence to link him to the crime.
Oh, wow.
He was questioned, investigated, but ultimately they had to let him go.
Another dead end, another blow to a case that was already riddled with them. It's heartbreaking to think about the emotional roller coaster Kru's family must have gone through with each new lead that ultimately went nowhere.
It's unimaginable, and sadly, the years that followed brought little comfort or closure.
Oh, no.
3 years passed, and the case remained stubbornly cold.
Wow.
Despite Detective Kreider's tireless efforts, despite the community's hope for answers, the trail had gone cold, but the Ethiopian community refused to let Kru's memory fade.
Right.
They rallied together, organizing fundraisers and vigils, keeping his story alive in the hope that someone somewhere might have that crucial piece of information that could break the case open.
It speaks volumes about their strength and resilience as a community,
Mhm.
their refusal to let this tragedy simply be forgotten.
Absolutely. They even managed to raise the reward money to a staggering $10,000, a testament to their determination to find justice for Kru. They even put up a billboard near the crime scene,
Wow.
a poignant image of Kru's smiling face looking down on the street where he lost his life.
A constant reminder to the community, to the city, that this young man's life mattered and that his killer was still out there somewhere.
It was a powerful symbol, but sadly, it didn't lead to any significant breakthroughs.
Oh,
Even with the increased reward, the tips dried up and the case slipped further into obscurity.
oh, wow.
Years turned into a decade, and the hope for justice began to dwindle.
We have an audio clip of Detective Kreider from a few years ago where he reflects on the case and makes a plea to the public.
Okay.
It's a poignant reminder of the human toll these unsolved cases take, not just on the victims' families, but on the investigators who dedicate their lives to seeking answers. Let's listen to what he has to say. You can hear the frustration in his voice, the weight of carrying this unsolved case for so many years.
And the hope he hasn't given up.
Right.
He still believes that someone out there knows something, even if it seems insignificant.
It makes you realize that sometimes the smallest detail, a seemingly unimportant observation, could be the key to unlocking the truth.
That's why it's so important for us to keep these stories alive, to keep talking about them.
Yeah.
You never know who might be listening, who might have that missing piece of the puzzle.
So what can we learn from Kru's story? What are the key takeaways from this deep dive?
Kru's story is a stark reminder of the fragility of life, how quickly everything can change in an instant. But it's also a story about the power of community, of people coming together to support each other in times of grief and uncertainty.
Right.
And it highlights the importance of never giving up hope, of continuing to seek answers even when the trail seems cold.
And it underscores the role we all play in seeking justice, in being observant, in speaking up when we see something that doesn't seem right.
Right.
We never know when our actions, no matter how small, might make a difference.
Exactly. If anything from this deep dive has resonated with you, if you have any information, no matter how insignificant it might seem, please don't hesitate to contact the Denver Police Department or Crime Stoppers.
Okay.
You might hold the key to finally bringing closure to this tragic case.
Kru Lo's case remains open, and any information, no matter how small, could be crucial. Remember, even the faintest glimmer of hope can illuminate the darkest corners of a cold case. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the unsolved murder of Kru Lo.